Hello and welcome to this video on the 10 classes of verbs in Sanskrit. Several of my Pali students have been asking for a while. Here it is. What I'm proposing to do is in this video just to concentrate on the 10 classes as defined by grammarians in Sanskrit. So we'll just be looking at the Sanskrit in this video. Sorry, finding my notes. And in the next video, we'll be looking at what happens in Pali. So we will, so to speak, be mapping the Pali classes of verbs onto the Sanskrit. Various questions have been asked. Well, if we're doing Pali, why do we need these Sanskrit classes? I will answer that question in the next video. So now we'll just get on with what it is in Sanskrit. Now, the first thing to remember about these 10 classes of verbs in Sanskrit is that this classification into 10 classes applies only to 4 of the tenses, not all of them, not all the tenses. I mean, it applies to the by far the most frequently used ones, so you really do need to know these. They being the present, the imperfect, the imperative, and the optative. The other tenses, the future, the aorist, the reduplicated perfect, and so on, the class system has got nothing to do with those. Equally, the passive, the formation of the pure passive is outside this classification system. Now, what do we mean by classes? Let me just give you my iPad. Here we are. Now, what these classes mean, they're just 10 different ways. Don't worry, there's a certain pattern to them. The 10 different ways in which the endings of the verb join to the root, and any modifications to the root that take place before the endings come on. Sometimes you have infixes to the root, sometimes you have modifications, sometimes the root completely unmodified. So these 10 classes simply means what happens to the root, what happens when you try to join the verb ending onto your root. Now, I was asked, well, why are there 10 classes? In fact, somebody even went as far as to say, who foisted these 10 classes onto us? Well, the answer is probably before Panini, they were known about, but Panini is the person who gave them, gave us these 10, not gave us, but observed as a scientist what was happening and said, there's a pattern here, every root can fit into one of these 10 ways of behavior. Panini didn't use the numbering 1 to 10, he used a different method, which I will go through item by item as we go through these 10 classes. What I would like you to do is all to have available to you, called up on your screen or open on the desk in front of you, the relevant section from MacDonnell, Sanskrit grammar. Mine's disappeared. I'll just pause and call it up for you. Actually, what I'll do, I'll call up so just to remind you where to find it. This is the Study Resources Guide. I'm looking here at the current edition, which is the 9th of June. Don't worry, all later editions will contain all of the information in the earlier one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to, that's the index headings, and here we see section 7, external online reference materials. So we go to page 22. Page 22. Come on, page 22. Okay. and Arthur A. McNell, Sanskrit Grammar for Students. This is the one here that we're looking at. Oops, sorry. So I'll click on this one to call it up. Sorry, damn cursor. Here we are. So McNell Sanskrit Grammar, and we're looking at his 124, the 10 classes. So look at paragraph 124, section 124, the 10 classes. Now, he talks about, several grammarians do talk about the 10 classes being divided into 2 conjugations. Okay, that's a useful enough thing. What really is meant here is that there are 4 of these classes, numbers 1, 4, 6, and 10, which all have an a at the end of the stem before the conjugational ending is added. And in what is loosely called the second conjugation, it's everything else. That's where the endings are added directly onto the root, or there's an infix, or there's a suffix to the root, or what I call infix to the entire word. Like, for example, in the kri, to buy, it's not krimi or kriami, it's krinami, and so on. And the tan, to stretch, it's not tanami or tanati, it's tanoti. This o is inserted. Monier-Williams divides them into 3 conjugations, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference. It's probably easier to stick to 2, and it's not vitally important. And in fact, the Sanskrit grammarians themselves haven't spoken about, as far as I know, they haven't spoken about these 2 what are called conjugations. So what we'll do first, we'll look at the roots that are by far the more common. What have I done here? What have I done here? Sorry. Here we are again. As I was saying, we will look firstly at the first conjugation, which is by far the more numerous of them. That's where we put an a in, and I will start now showing you exactly what is meant. I will call up the first conjugation. Have McDonnell in front of you now, I recommend, and I'll take him off the screen and we'll continue to follow on my iPad. Sorry, I've just got a new mouse. And actually, before dealing with the various conjugations, what I'm going to do is to just show you why I'm dealing only with a couple of limited forms of the verb. Look up paradigms. First conjugation, bhu, to be, and we know this is, most of you will have seen this, bhavami, bhavasi, bhavati, and so on. In the plural, bhavanti, you know all those, and there's the imperative, for example, third plural, bhavantu, sarve sattva sukhita bhavantu, imperative, may they be, let them be. So you've got the, as I mentioned earlier, just these 4 tenses are affected by which class a verb is in. So where the present, you see the imperfect, the imperative, and the optative. And you'll see that for Sanskrit, there are kind of 9 plus 9 forms for each tense. That is the first, second, and third, singular, dual, and plural. And in the Parasmaipada, the same, first, second, and third, singular, dual, and plural, so 18. So actually there's 72 forms here. If you count 9 plus 9, 18 times 4 is 72. For the purposes of this video, I am going to be looking only at the third Parasmaipada singular, the one that you know as bhavati, and the third Atmanepada singular, the one that you know as bhavate. Why? The answer is, once you have looked at the third singular Parasmaipada and the third singular Atmanepada in each class, from those two you can construct the whole of the rest of the class. For example, I'm going to scroll down to, let's look at one that might look a little bit intimidating for you. Kri, look at that. 9th class Kri, look at all these different forms here. Kriniyat, for example, krinitna. To know what class a verb is and how the verb behaves, you don't need to have all of these 72 forms per verb. All you need to know, look here where I'm, krinati there, third singular Parasmaipada krinati, third singular Atmanepada krinite. Once you know that and that, all of the rest will follow. It's like in Latin, so many entire tables of verbs covering pages. All you need to know to be able to construct any one of them, once you've learned how the conjugations go, you only need 4. So the entire verb dicere, dixi, dicebat, dixisse, all these other forms of the verbs, of the verb, and it applies to virtually every verb in Latin. All you need to know is 4 forms. Dico, dicere, dixi, dictum. They're called the principal parts. Once you know those 4, then you simply apply, you map that on anywhere in the entire conjugational system. You just need to know those 4. Similarly, to learn how the classes of the verbs go in Sanskrit, just learn those 2. Third singular Parasmaipada, third singular Atmanepada. Of course, there's more to be learnt in due course, but this is all matters of detail that you fill in. This is to give you the big picture. Once you've got that big picture, everything else falls into place, and this is true equally for the Pali learners among you. So let us go to the first conjugation, and there are 4 verbs here, 4 classes of verb, and we'll deal with the other 6 a little later. The names given to these classes by Panini, and that have now become entrenched in Sanskrit grammar, and universally, I think it's true to say, used by the Sanskrit grammarians, rather than numbering them 1 through 10. He named the class by a particular exemplar. For example, class 1, what we call class 1, he used the root bhu as an example of how just the bhu class. And for the second class, the ad class, because the root ad, meaning to eat, is just the exemplar that he happened to choose to represent that class. He could have chosen any other member of the class. That was just what he chose. And whereas we call it class 1, we usually use Roman numerals for this class 1, Panini called this one the the bhu adi gana. Bhu, that's the name of that root, to be. Adi, meaning etc. The bhu etc. Gana, class or group. As I've explained to you before, in other places, adi literally means beginning. So but if you put it at the end of a compound or compounded with a previous word as bhu adi gana, it means etc. The bhu beginning. In other words, that list of things that begins with bhu. So the bhu adi gana. And of course, by sandhi, the u followed by an a has become a v. So it's actually called the bhavadi gana. The bhavadi gana, you add on the terminations. I'll call back the terminations that we know, the mi, si, ti, and so on. We'll just look at the. I lost my cursor again. Here we are, sorry. And we're just going to look at ti and te, but all of the other, you just add these endings onto the modified root. What's happened to here? Why is it bhavati? Bhavate. Now I tell you why. What you do here in the first class is that you have the guna. If the root is or ends in a vowel, like, ni, bhu, or if it is an I or U or R plus a single consonant, then you gunate the root. For example, by the way, you should all hopefully have looked at this separate video I've done on guna and vriddhi. I'll just give you the reference now in case you haven't, because you will need to look at this. Here we are. This is page 20 of the current study resources guide. The page numbers will change, but there we are. It's in the section dealing with Sanskrit and Pali grammar. And so I keep losing my cursor. And it's dealt with at MacDonnell, section 17, Guna and Vriddhi. And see, I've got two videos on it there. So it should have been one video, but we had a technical glitch. So please do look at these videos to understand more about the Guna and the Vriddhi if you haven't yet done so. Okay, so take bhu, gunate that root, and the long u becomes bho, and then put an a at the end of it. Now, you know what happened with bho plus a? It resolves itself back to ava. So bho a becomes bhava. And all of this is explained in the separate video on guna. So bhava. So we now have bhava as the stem from which we now construct the entire present system. By the way, not just the present tense, it's the present system. And we call it the present system because it includes, back to MacDonnell again, the actual present tense, the imperfect tense, the imperative, and the optative. Imperative and optative are moods rather than tenses. There we are. So what we call the present system, present, imperfect, imperative, and optative. Incidentally, Pali learners among you kind of ignore the imperfect, and that has been superseded by the aorist in Pali. So if you look at this table, they have all got this bhava, 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 with one exception, maybe a couple of exceptions, bhave. In fact, that's a merging of bhava plus e. But it all formed on the a. Bhavami, bhavasi, bhavati. Some modifications, we'll deal with those as we go along. Basically, here is your gunated root, bhu, bhav, bhu, gunated to bho, with the thematic, we call it thematic because it's the theme, it's there throughout this class, the a, followed by the endings, mi, tc. Notice, by the way, that the endings in an M or a V, if they're preceded by an A, the A is always lengthened. Just bhavami, bhavava, bhavama, and so on. Same in the Atmanepada, bhavavahe, bhavamahe, and throughout the other tenses as well. Let's look, for example, at another one. The root ni, meaning to lead. Sorry, let me give you my iPad. The root ni, to lead. Gunates to ne. Ne plus a by regular sandhi becomes naya. And there you have it. That is the conjugational base for the entire present system. So nayati, nayasi, nayami, anayam. So this is fixed throughout. So once you've got that, you've got the rest of it. Let's now look at roots ending in a consonant. Very, very common. So before going on to the roots ending in consonants, just look at another in a vowel that is tr, with a long subdotted r, meaning to cross. Makes its guna with tar, put on the a, and so we get tarati, crosses. Now, note that this gunation of the vowel in this class 1 verb will occur almost always, I think it's right to say always, but certainly almost always, only if the root ends in a vowel, as in bhu, ni, tr, or if it ends in a single consonant, not a doubled consonant or a consonant cluster, if it ends in a single consonant preceded by a short i, u, or r. Examples here. The root sid, meaning to repel. Oh, caution here, there are two roots sid with separate meanings. One is siddha, I mean to accomplish. Same as we get sadhu, siddha, and siddhi. This one is sid, to repel. And it gunates, it's got an e followed by a single consonant. Remember, the is a single consonant. That becomes sedhati. And you get mud with guna, u to o, so you get mudati, to rejoice. By the way, be careful, it is not the same as sid, meaning to be successful, which is a class 4 verb, which we'll come to in a moment, which being a sid, class 4 characteristically adds in a ya, being siddhyati. So if you just look at the root sid, you don't know which it is, but when you see it conjugated, sedhati, repel, siddhyati, to accomplish, to be successful, mudati. Again, it's because we have a short vowel followed by a single consonant. Where we have a long vowel, in class 1, like jeev, the root jeev, to live, the root will remain unchanged. That's where we have jivati. Where we have a consonant cluster, nand, to be happy, to rejoice, we get nandati. In fact, the ah doesn't normally, nothing normally happens to the ah in the first class. But this is an example. You get a consonant cluster. It doesn't alter the root. Oh, I forgot to give you another one. Vrid, you see, vrid, to grow or to increase. Guna of ri is ar, so vrid becomes vardhati, to grow or to increase. So that's the overview of class 1. Now we'll go to class 4. No, we won't. We'll go to class 6. And then we'll come right back to class 4 after this. Class 6, let us take the root tud, meaning to strike, cognate with our contusio in Latin, contusion, a bruise, contusion, where you've been a trauma, and we've been struck. And within the this classification system, this is the root that's actually used by Panini, and so this was the tudadigana, the tud adi gana. The important distinction here between class 1 and class 6 is that the vowel of the root does not change. Why does it not change? Because in class 1, back in Vedic times, the stress or the pitch fell on the root. It was stressed, and therefore if a consonant, a vowel is stressed, it will often tend to gunate, vidveda, so tarati. Whereas if it's unstressed, if the stress falls on the ending, it will not gunate. That's where you get tud, you get mud, modati, stress on the mud, modati, but tud, tudati, not todati, tudati, because in Vedic the stress fell on the final syllable. When Sanskrit is being pronounced now, the stress would be in the same place, modati, tudati. But just remember, in Vedic, that accounts for this difference. So tud. Then let's take this as an example. So this just tudati, tudate, apanipada. There we are. That's all you need to know there. You add these endings to the unmodified root. Let's take another example. The root a long it's not the same as the short r, not equal to, that means to do or to make. This kr with a long r, the long sound, means to scatter. And in this particular case, in fact, all 6th class verbs ending in a r, it actually gunates. Sorry, it alters to ir. It doesn't gunate, it alters. If it gunated, it would be karati, but it's kirati. So he scatters is kirati. I'll put this stress here, stress mark, not that we use it in Sanskrit, but it will help you to understand why. Tudati, to the kirati. So there we are. When I said there's no modification, the r does become an ir. because you can't have a r followed directly by a vowel. Normally it would become krati, but the little I comes in, kirati. So that explains why you get a difference between, for example, mud, modati, but tud, tudati. That explains it. Now we'll look at class 4. And what happens in class 4 is that you add this characteristic y to the root. For example, let's take the root nah, meaning to tie or to bind, as in tying a knot. Take the root, add in a y, and then proceed as before. Nahyati, nahyate. The name of this particular class for Panini was the div. So for him, so it was the divadi gana. This root div is to shine, as in deva, the shining beings, the gods, devata. There's a slight irregularity, and that is simply that in the conjugation the e lengthens. So in fact, you get the conjugation stem divya. So divyati and so on. Divya. So that's basically all we really need to know about the 4th class. The rest of it, once you've got this bit, everything follows exactly as the other classes. And the 10th class always ends in an aya. And Panini call this the chur class, from the root chur, meaning to steal. And a thief is a chora. And the 10th class is very often used as a causative, to make somebody do something, or as a denominative. By a denominative verb, that simply means making a verb out of a noun. So chora, let's take the noun chora, meaning a thief. So chorayati means to do thieving, to act as a thief. So chorayati. You get, this is a very, very common class of verb. One interesting etymological feature, by the way, here is that this ya there, you get several words where you have a y in Sanskrit, you have a z in Greek, and this ayati is cognate with the Greek iso, from which we get the very common English ending to eyes something, or spelt in America eyes with a z. So this ending eyes, to monetize, theorize, de-Stalinize. We add it to so many. If we want to make a verb out of a noun, we put eyes. And this actually reflects what was happening in Sanskrit. You make a verb out of a noun, chorayati, to behave like a thief. Again, once you put this aya in, usually, not always, with a gunated root, the gunation will follow class 1. Chorayati, also used as a causative. You'll know the root gum, which is a class 1, but slightly irregular, because the gum changes to a ch, so it becomes gum gachati. But, sorry, what have I done there? the causative, gamayati, meaning to make somebody go. Sometimes you get a vriddhi, you get a kri, to do. You can make a causative with a vriddhi kar, karayati, to cause somebody to do something, to make somebody do something. So that deals with what MacDonnell and some other grammarians call the first conjugation, and that's simply because, sorry, I didn't even finish this one, Gachati. The first conjugation, because all four forms of it, 1, 4, 6, and 10, are characterized by having this a between the root and the ending. This video is getting a little bit long. What I'm going to do now, I am going to stop this video here, and I will do the remaining classes in a separate one.